There's so many talking points coming out of chapter 1134, like the former King Harold's supposed peaceful philosophy, the Walrus School and Owl Library, Loki and his new friend Mosa, or as the official says, Shaggy. The arrival of two members of the Holy Knights, Shanks' brother included, and there is so much to talk about on each of those respective points, but for whatever reason I've chosen the one that, if I'm thinking off the top of my head, is far and away the most controversial aspect of the entire story, because including chapter 1133 there are 3 examples where an argument can be made for them falling under the category of fake out death, something that has dominated discussions in the community whenever one has happened or is revealed to have happened in the story. And the reason why I am talking about this rather than anything else is because, I mean, 1, it's topical, it's relevant right now, and 2 is because I know my opinion differs from the general consensus. And I'll start by saying that even though my personal thoughts are different, I completely understand why people view fake out deaths the way that they do, why it's the most unpopular part of the story, and that many of those points from a completely unbiased point of view I do agree with. They've been part of the story since early on, Alabasta at least, which has arguably still the most infamous one as the first, and since then one has popped up every now and then. And with each of them, a recurring point is that it takes away from the emotional impact of the story. With Pal, it was his grand sacrifice to save the country, or at least the people in the vicinity, from certain death, although it seems that he had nothing to worry about because he survived the bomb's explosion from point blank range. I mean, it was physically impossible for him to get any closer to it, so I'm sure the people fighting below would have been completely fine. Pound saved his daughter from being boiled alive and expressed his joy that she'd found her own happiness while Oven lifted a flaming sword behind him, and we next see him drifting near Dressrosa, which eventually leads to him reuniting with both of his daughters. I could go on, but I'll speak more specifically on each example separately later on. The idea is that the gut punches from the supposed deaths of these characters is proved worthless by their survival, since the initial moment has now lost its meaning, and that is true. With the hindsight of knowing these characters will survive, whatever happened to them or whatever they did will lose some of its value. And in a similar vein, consequences: if no one dies, how can the story claim to have tension when there's seemingly nothing on the line? In these grand battles where everyone's fighting tooth and nail, their lives are on the line, but they make it through in the end. Surely there must have been some sort of loss to mourn. Not everything could have gone well, and obviously in story this loss has to be substantial to get any real reaction from the reader, so the character who would have hypothetically lost their life must be someone of value and importance to the story, not someone expendable. Again, makes sense, and I agree, especially in One Piece where it's been so heavily built up how dangerous the New World is and such, and with death being the ultimate consequence, actions are going to have repercussions, and if not, then wouldn't that make it harder to get invested in the story? Kind of linking back to emotional impact, is there that connection between the reader and the story where it feels like the scales are balancing on a knife edge? Can the reader fully immerse themselves into the narrative? And the next point would be, what's the point of them in the first place if the character isn't even going to die? Surely the plot could have been modelled in a different way so that it's clear that they did in fact survive that moment, and the reader isn't going to be left on strings for a little while. With a storyteller like Oda, who has a very proven track record of consistently being able to make readers feel the most extreme emotions while reading his story, which includes actual character deaths, it's pretty safe to say that his motive isn't to just get a cheap version of those real emotions from us. Because what's the point if he can get us to feel those real emotions anyway, if he so chooses? With this point, since none of us are Oda himself, there's no way to fully determine whether he plans these plot points with the eventual fake out death already in mind, or if there's something he decides on after the fact. But in either scenario, what is the benefit of doing it, and doing it on such a semi-regular basis as he does? I believe Oda himself has stated that he reserves death for the most important characters who have a great impact on the plot, and that he doesn't want to kill purely for the shock value, which makes sense. Killing characters left and right diminishes the meaning behind them. But on the other hand, doesn't doing the exact opposite and bringing them back cause that same negative effect? There's plenty more reasons you can think of for why they are bad and why the story suffers because of them, but now moving on to my thoughts, which will strictly be my perspective alone. Repeating what I said before, even though I have an opinion that differs from the wider collective viewpoint in some places, I can still fully understand that perspective. You know, if I was being 100% completely unbiased, then I would continue listing reasons like I was doing before, but moving forward, this is my own view that is based on my feelings towards the story, how I've read the story, which isn't something that I can fully quantify, if that makes sense. I may be able to get some of my thoughts across well, while others not so much. And also, don't worry, this isn't just going to be me blindly defending fake out deaths. So to say it as clearly as I can, each fake out death is different, and therefore my view on each one of these specific ones is going to also be different. As much as they are grouped together, they are separated by the most simple thing, which is that they are each a separate character, each of whom I feel differently about. So in a sense, my justifications for my feelings towards each fake out revolves around my feelings for each character, where in one example I've just never felt that passionately about them, while in another I have felt passionately about them. And I'm not going to go over every fake out death just for that reason, that I view each one differently. So with my justifications on each one being unique, going through all of them would take a while. So back to Pell again. There's all that his would-be sacrifice would have meant for the story, but at the same time he was never someone who I was ever that greatly interested in, so I thought his sacrifice was a nice moment, a great moment for the plot. But the fact that he survived didn't feel like some great betrayal to me, if that makes sense. So I still did understand why it wasn't a good move from the narrative perspective, but because I didn't feel that strongly about Pell in the first place, it wasn't something that really affected my enjoyment of the story or the arc in any major way. And another thing, actually, a big factor in this is that with these fake outs, the characters survive a lot that they theoretically shouldn't, and that also ruins the immersion in some way, since there's no concept of what should or shouldn't hurt these guys, so it makes it much harder to suspend disbelief. But my own view is that in this story with such incredible abilities, there's never really been a definitive scale on what should hurt someone, what should kill someone, with each character having, for lack of a better term, different stats. And beyond that, with a story as far-reaching and fantastical as One Piece, such a topic as what should kill a character isn't something that I personally spend any time thinking about. Even in these scenarios, the biggest example of this is with Pell surviving such a huge bomb, while Ashura Doji in Wano was really killed by some sticks of dynamite he strapped to himself. And yeah, that doesn't make much sense, especially when you consider Ashura Doji is far stronger than Pell. But again, for whatever reason, it just isn't something that really bothers me at all. I guess it would be because we see all kinds of different characters go through all kinds of different things, whether they get hurt or don't get hurt, whether they walk it off or drink some milk to fix themselves up. There's just so much going on that I don't think there's any point in trying to figure this out, you know? And back to Alabasta, Usopp, who at that time, I mean he still is, but at that time he was the most basic and regular of normal people, pretty much a civilian who just happened to have a good shot. He looks like his skull is going to crumble from a gentle breeze, and then all the way in Wano, his skull gets pulverized. So what I'm saying is that what should or shouldn't kill someone from a logical point of view, I don't think holds that much weight. However, there is one time where even my tolerance for this was pushed to its limits, which is with Pagaya's fake out, the father of Konis, because I talked about how Usopp is a civilian. This guy is the most civilian-esque civilian to ever civilian, and he survived a direct strike from one of Enel's lightning attacks. I mean, come on now, that's too far even for me. At least Pell and some of these other characters, who I will get to, were actually trained fighters, whereas Pagaya, he's a 50-year-old man with no sort of combat abilities at all, and he survived an attack from someone who Oda stated would have a 500 million berry bounty. I mean, really? But to add to my thoughts on this Pagaya situation, I said that because I didn't feel too strongly about Pell, his fake out didn't really affect me. I could not care less about someone like Pagaya, so I don't really care about what happens to his character, and I know that doesn't really make sense or have any relevance here, because regardless of a character's role or significance, a fake out death is still a fake out death. But again, that's always just been my perspective, I guess, which is why I will have more to say on the characters coming up, because of them having actual importance to the story and whom I have stronger feelings for. Take Pound. Like, who? I mean, I obviously know who he is, but like, I don't care about Pound at all. His supposed sacrifice did make me feel something, you know, him saving his daughter and her family who didn't even know who he was. It was a great moment, but the revelation of him being alive didn't hurt me because, beyond that one moment I didn't care about Pound. And on the contrary, I was actually happy for him to be able to reunite with both of his daughters. So in a sense, Oda's words of only killing off actually important characters kind of applies here with Pagaya and Pound, who aren't that important at all. But I'm not going to give him any credit here because I don't think that fake-out deaths were the situations he was referring to when he made this statement. And now to these characters who fit into the fake-out death category, who I actually feel strongly about in one way or another. And this first one is the only fake-out death that really did disappoint me, that I truly was not a fan of at all. Not I just didn't care, I did not like it, and that is Kinemon's. And continuing that idea of how much I care for each specific character, Kinemon had been around for so long by that point that I had really grown to like his character, understand his motives and his actions, compared to the previously discussed from Punk Hazard all the way up to his solo confrontation with Kaido in Wano. How many years passed in real world time, and how many hundreds of chapters or hundreds of episodes of him joking around, getting serious, and us slowly learning more about who he is and his mission, what his goal was, how he grew from making comments about Nami's sense of fashion, which I did find funny because with him being from Wano, being from a place of such a different culture, he was so out of touch, to learning about the other scabbards and Oden in Zou, to the revelation of the 20-year time jump and the truth about the country and his place in all of it, to the samurai's big battle on the rooftop with Kaido all together, where he was crushed once again, to the final stand where he knew his fate. But as long as he could give his shogun the future of his nation a fighting chance, then it would be worth it. And then Kaido's monologue about losing after stabbing him. There was so much behind this moment, and even then came one of Momo's great speeches, which was a direct result of him seeing Kinemon seemingly die before him. But a few fart jokes later, he was back. Apparently Law didn't put him back together properly all the way back in Punk Hazard, which, even if that was plausible, surely he would have mentioned it or felt something was off during all of that time, but saying that just because it makes sense doesn't make it free from criticism. This was bad, but it isn't something that I hold a grudge for. Like, I don't hold Kinemon to this every time I see him. For instance, when Momo was given his speech as the new shogun and he was at a loss for words, when he asked Kinemon for help, I didn't look at Kinemon on the page and think, you should be dead, what are you doing here, you should be dead, go away. That doesn't seem fair. Like, Kinemon himself didn't choose to survive, it was written to happen by Oda. So that fake out death isn't something I'm going to hold that fictional character accountable for. The actual fake out death may have disappointed me, but I see no reason to carry that feeling with me and bring it up whenever I see him, if that makes sense. And in all honesty, when he told Momo to bluff his heart out, to fake it till he makes it, it made me laugh. Not sarcastically or mockingly, but genuinely, because that's pretty much what he did, that's what happened to him. And moving to Egghead now with the Vegapunk satellites, this is now getting to the ones that are more relevant to the current ongoings in the manga, and I did talk about this example specifically in my last video, so to repeat that but also add a bit more. This example is by far the most unique out of the bunch because of how little the term fake out death actually tells you about what happened to these specific characters. The entirety of the Egghead arc was a huge metaphor for the idea of what it means to be alive and to die. The concept of free will and individuality. Can only a biological organic being truly be alive, and can a robotic being with a completely artificial consciousness that reaches far outside the norm ever truly be considered dead? What does it truly mean for someone to die? Dr. Vegapunk split himself into 7 parts, the original Stella and the 6 satellites, with each one having their own mind, own thoughts, and certainly own free will and individuality. And the biggest testament to that is the fact that one of them, York, betrayed the others to further her own goals and desires, and to add to that, the existence of Punk Records, an entity that goes far beyond that realm of standard consciousness and existence in its own right as the brain of the original Dr. Vegapunk that serves as the main mind for all of them, and it would also continue functioning even after the original Stella's death. So with these artificial beings whose well, being can't be pinned down by traditional measures, that would mean that their lives and their deaths also can't be quantified in the same way as a normal person. Therefore, the fact that they survived was a good thing to me, because if their lives are difficult to define, then it should be the very same for their deaths as well. They are artificial intelligence who upload their entire minds to a cloud, both literally and metaphorically. Their brains and conscience are genuinely just data, lines of code, so why wouldn't they be able to fix themselves back up again? And this sort of mystery or disconnect from what we know just adds to the enigma that is Dr. Vegapunk. And now talking about the Stellar. He's dead. The true Dr. Vegapunk is long gone, with the fallout and meaning of that being felt on a personal level with the likes of Kizaru and his anguish and Sentomaru's silent suffering, and then on a global level with his message and the destruction of Egghead Island. Then comes the reveal that Lilith brought along a complete clone of the Stellar with her to Elbaf. I am fine with the idea that he would have needed something like this because he needed months to study the rescued books of Ohara on Elbaf, but he couldn't spend that much time away with the government and specifically Saint Saturn watching his every move, so he needed a way to go there. And with this clone, as much as it is a perfect copy of the real Vegapunk, it is still a clone, still only a satellite, and the real smartest man in the world is still long gone. With this, I'm going to need to see more of it before I can fully form my opinion, because I'm picturing where this could go, and there's some things I like while others not so much. The not so much is that by perfect clone it means perfect right down to the smallest detail, and what I mean by that is I'm fine with the personality being the same, like his quirks and whatnot, manner of speech, but it's more so the memory side of things that is bothering me. If this satellite clone were to activate and wake up with the full memories of the Stellar, then I'm not sure about that one. Say it were to wake up and say something like, "I thought I died, oh well, thank you for reviving me, Lilith." At that point, it isn't just a clone. If that thing has the full memories and full knowledge of everything that the Stellar went through and has the exact same personality on top of that, then it straight up just is the real Vegapunk. On the other side though, my headcanon future scenarios that I do like, firstly is that this clone can be used to shift the tides of the final war. And I've already established that I'm fine with the existence of the clone itself, so it could be used to broadcast another message, but this time telling the whole truth of what happened on Egghead, what Morgan's newspaper didn't mention and what the world government censored, how Luffy didn't hold Vegapunk hostage, that he didn't kill Vegapunk. He wasn't the one who set Egghead ablaze. The truth could come to light, and the balance of power could really begin shifting away from the world government for the first time since its creation after the Void Century. And one other thing is that I would love a scene where Kizaru comes into contact with this clone of the guy, his best friend, who he shot down with his own two hands, because of the torture that would bring him, seeing what haunts him the most, even if he were to overcome his paranoia and understand that it's only a clone, only a satellite. I think something like that, seeing him struggle in that situation, would do wonders for his character. All in all, this outcome with Vegapunk just brings up one huge question for me, which is, how smart do you make the smartest man in the world? Being the pinnacle of intelligence in this world with its own rules, Vegapunk should be capable of anything if he so wished. Like him making a perfect clone of himself should fall right into his capabilities, but what is the upper limit of how smart he is? Well, where do you draw the line between him being smart to him being a sorcerer, you know? Like, think about the reveal that he knew about the traitor and used a machine to wipe his own memory. If he's smart enough to make a machine to do that with these specific parameters, why couldn't he have made the machine in this way to make things easier for himself? And if he made it like that, why couldn't he have made it in this way to make things even more easier? Like, where do you draw the line between what he can and can't do? I mean, if we got to Egghead and it was revealed he could make a fully functioning spaceship to take us to the moon, I would have 100% bought it, as within his capabilities as the smartest man in the world. If he used the rotation of the planet to power Egghead Island or something, I would have said, sure, why not? It's the paradox of being the smartest. How smart does that actually mean? Because everything Vegapunk has done up to and including this clone seems very believable as something that he could do. And the last one, which I'm not going to spend too much time on or even bother fully explaining, Soul's survival after the Ohara incident. I am a huge fan of him being alive because of what it means for Nico Robin. There's obviously much more to his character on Elbaf, but for the sole reason of the emotions that came out of seeing those two reunite, means that his survival was more than worth it. To see them share this happiness after everything they've been through, Soul being alive does not in the slightest invalidate any part of the Ohara flashback or any of Robin's development. In my opinion, this is the prize after all of that suffering, something that they both deserve. And I'll throw in Kuma getting his individuality back, even though it hasn't happened yet and I don't think it falls under this category, although some say it does. Seeing him and Bonnie happy at the end of all this will fill me with joy, and in my opinion, just like with Soul and Robin, that would not erase or invalidate anything that had happened beforehand, from Kuma's birth up to Kuma saving Bonnie on Egghead. I just want characters who have suffered immensely to be able to get that happy ending, and if it's so wrong of me to think that way, then so be it. It's solely my point of view, which isn't hurting anybody, and I mean that with everything. I try to put my point of view over with as much respect as I can, because I'm fully aware how quickly south these conversations could go if my choice of wording or my tone of voice is slightly off, and how that could piss someone off. I know my perspective puts me in the minority, but that's fine, that's okay. These are just the thoughts of this one guy at the end of the day.